You're listening to the Happy Doc Student Podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing clarity to the often mysterious doctoral process. Do you feel like you're losing your mind? Let me and my guests show you how to put more joy in your journey and graduate with your sanity, health, and relationships intact. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Frederick, and this is episode 87. Now, you've all heard horror stories related to being a student in a doc program, but today's guest, Dr. Frank Buck, has none of those. A retired school administrator, Frank is a productivity speaker, writer, and coach. His dream for you is to make organization easy so you can increase productivity, decrease stress, and yes, even enjoy life. He has been ranked number 1 in the world in the time management category by global gurus every year since 2019. Frank's dissertation was on time management, and today he will be sharing actionable strategies that helped make his journey enjoyable. Frank, welcome to the show.
Heather, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. I love having productivity people on because I always learn new things. So why don't we start by you giving the audience a little bit of background? Maybe tell us what it was that caused you to want to pursue a degree, or we'll definitely get into how the heck is it that you got through that journey without any of those horror stories?
Well, I started my career as a band director, and I really thought that would be my career, that I would be a junior high band director for 30 years. About a decade into the journey, I decided I wanted to run whole school. Went into school administration, took the school principal courses sort of thing. And my first administrative job was as a middle school assistant principal. And that's really what began the journey to the doctorate, although I had no idea at the time. The central office for that school system was only a mile or so down the road. And one of the central office administrators, a guy I'll always remember, Dr. Ed Ballou, from the day he met me, he called me Dr. Buck. Well, I wasn't Dr. Buck. I was not even thinking about getting a doctorate. But every time he saw me, "Good morning, Dr. Buck." And he would say things to me like, of all the programs I was in graduate school, the doctoral program was the smoothest of them all. And I thought, yeah. Well, Heather, after listening to this guy call me Dr. Buck for a solid year, next thing I know, I'm enrolled in a doctoral program. And through the journey, if things weren't quite so smooth, I thought back to those words. Of all the programs I was in, the doctoral program was the smoothest one. So I would think, there must be something I'm not doing right. There must be a question I need to ask. And I found very quickly, there was a wonderful, and now we call them administrative assistants. Back then it was okay to call them the secretary. But the wonderful lady that kind of kept everything running and kept the professors going where they needed to go, and was the one who was really responsible for all of the logistics and making things work. When anything was ambiguous, when anything was hard, you could go and talk to her, and things became easy. She could say, here's step number 1, step number 2, step number 3. So, a debt of gratitude that we have there. And, it doesn't have to be hard. There are so many horror stories, but I really don't have one. I loved the program. And for those who are listening and who are watching, you're in the right place. Whether you're in a doctoral program and you're nearing the end, if you're nearing the beginning, if you're at that place where somebody needs to talk you off a ledge, where you go, look, I can't do this, I want to give up. No, you don't want to give up. You're in the right place. And if you're thinking about starting this journey, yes, you're also in the right place. Do your homework at the beginning, but you're in the right place.
Frank, I love that you brought up someone kind of planted a seed, right? Here he was calling you Dr. Buck, and then before you know it, so here's this idea. It wasn't something that from the age of 10, you thought, I'm going to pursue my doctorate. This came later in your career.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I also love that he kind of laid the foundation, giving you the option that this didn't have to be this terrible experience, that it could be smooth. Now, you're going to share some skills that the student can be using and that faculty can share with students. But you also mentioned the administrative assistant. There are people who have information that can make this journey a lot easier. And sometimes it's just finding out who that person is.
I could not agree more. And be nice to them. Often that person is also a person who's overlooked. They're not the chair of the department. So often they don't get the respect that they're due. And when they get that attention and when they get that respect, you've earned a friend for life. And they will go out of their way to help you. And it makes so much difference. None of us do this journey alone. Nobody. And I don't care what field you're in. People who are successful are people who have developed networks, and we help each other. A rising tide lifts all boats. So, build that network. For me, Ed Ballou was such an important part. If you're starting this journey, who's in the program now at the university where you're considering, whether it's in person, online, whatever, who's in that program now? Who's recently graduated from that program? Who can tell you where the landmines are? Who can tell you what will make things easier, what will make things harder? Don't go it alone. Don't go it alone.
And you know what, Frank, as you were talking, I thought, a lot of people who are drawn to a doctoral program because they've been so successful, typically in their career, or if they're going straight through in their academics, they're not used to asking for help. But as you were talking about the landmines and kind of needing to know the lay of the land, I was thinking, hey, if I'm going to go on this hike, if I'm going to climb Mount Everest, I'm going to talk to people who have done it. I'm going to say, give me your top 10 tricks. What do I need to know now? What do I not need to worry about now? And so when we think about kind of organizing this journey, I would love for you to share how it was that you stayed organized from the get-go and how that really played into your successful completion.
Well, the biggest thing that helped me, and again, this was someone else who suggested it to me, was decide on what you want to do your dissertation on the front end. See, so many people go into the program and they see it as, okay, I'm going to take these courses, and I'll take some research courses. And after I take all the courses, then I'll decide what I want to do my dissertation on, and we'll get started on the dissertation. And those are the people that wind up being all but dissertation. The advice to me was decide what you want to do your dissertation on before you ever enter the program. Because after all, every class you take, you're going to have to do a paper, right? So instead of doing all these little papers that have nothing to do with each other, and now you've got this big brick wall called the dissertation in front of you, find some way, every one of these little papers that you write, find some way to twist the requirements of that paper so that it matches up with your dissertation topic. So every paper is feeding the dissertation. And when it comes time to actually write that dissertation proposal, you've got such a background of wealth around you. It's almost doing it backwards. So one thing I would advise is find out what the parameters are. Just recently, I talked to someone in a doctoral program that said, really, they sort of give you 5 or 6 topics that you just pick from a list. I mean, you can't just pick your topic. No, not at this university. So be sure on the front end, that you do that. So do some research on the front end. It was a long time ago for me. So at that time, it was first go to the library to Dissertation Abstracts International. I'm sure it's online now. That may be the best thing to do. Dissertation Abstracts on International online, and see What other dissertations have been done around that general topic? Put a little twist to something that you like. Do it with a new population. Replicate a study that had been done some time ago that, well, things have changed. We need to revisit that topic. I mean, you don't have to start from square one, and pick the chair as early as you can. And I know some places, especially with online, you can't necessarily pick your chair. I did have that luxury. I felt like I was approaching that person too soon. If I had it to do all over again, I would have approached them sooner, because they do this all the time. And the things that you might assume to be true and aren't necessarily, they're going to be able to guide you and tell you, no, that's not the way it works. And Frank, this would be a whole lot easier. I'd suggest, A, B, C, D.
Frank, the two things there, let's unpack them one at a time. Coming up with your topic, or at least knowing your general topic area early, is the number one time-saving hack that I can think of to give a doctoral student, because you're right. You can tweak whether it's a discussion post, a presentation, a paper, whether it's the theoretical foundation or a cross-cultural aspect. I mean, pick the dissertation topic or applied doctoral project topic, and you can tweak it and pivot it throughout most classes that you're required to take. And what that does is it results in you being an expert in the literature by the time it's time to sit down. And there is no substitute for steeping yourself in the literature.
Yes. The very first class meeting of our cohort, Boyd Roken was the chair of that department. And he said to us, each of you will soon become known as the expert in that field. You will refer to each other as that, and you really will be. You will become the expert in that particular thing. And as you go from those, one class to the other, and you're doing papers that are in some way, using your topic, one that comes to mind is, I forget which class it was, but we had to do the paper, and we also had to get up in front of the class and do a talk based on the paper. Well, my topic was going to be the relationship between time management practices and principal effectiveness. In other words, what is it that the effective principals do to manage their time versus the not so effective principles? And so I did the paper of that particular class. I got up and I did my presentation, and the feedback from the class was, Frank, we understand the practices. You've got a survey that lists all these different time management practices on a scale of 1 to 8. To what extent do you use those? That's all so clear. Frank, how are you going to measure who's an effective principal and who's not? That's where things got sticky. And so finally, one of the class members said, look, why don't you forget the effectiveness part? We think that it would be a fascinating study to talk about what are the time management practices principals are using most, least. Is it different depending on whether they're a high school or middle school or elementary principal? Is it different depending on their age or experience? And I thought, wow, this has just gotten so much simpler. And suddenly I could see my way clear on this. And so the study was a study of the time management practices of Alabama principals. And what we found was there is a significant difference between how people manage their time, elementary versus middle versus high school, male versus female even. A slight significant difference, but no significant difference depending on the age of the person, the number of years experience, or the number of years experience in school administration. And so if getting older doesn't make a difference, getting more experience doesn't make a difference, what would make a difference? Well, it's likely going to be training in time management. And so here I'm writing the books, I'm doing the workshops, and walking the walk that I talked about in that dissertation.
And Frank, I love that you used your dissertation as this natural stepping stone to your career now. And I'll be sure to have links in the show notes to all your amazing resources, including your book. But before we get to that, I want to spend a little bit more time about this suggestion that you have. It sounds so simple. Pick your topic as early as you can. And I think what I personally have seen is, well, let me back up. You and I both went to a land-based school. There was a lot of research that we had to do. You probably had to write a statement of purpose, I'm guessing, or some sort of statement to the university saying why you wanted to go there, why you wanted that specific program, maybe even hinting at what you wanted to do after and the type of research you would be interested in doing, at least in general, right? So I am a huge advocate of online learning because it delivers educational opportunities to people who might not have the ability to attend a land-based like you and I did.
Yes.
But one of the things I have seen is that people will, whether it's through marketing or word of mouth, find themselves in a program without having gone through those kind of hoops and really think about why this program, who's here doing, what kind of research are they doing at this school? What type of faculty are here, and are their interests related to mine? And do I see this as a logical step to a future career? So I love that you're talking about, picking your chair. Hey, maybe you can't, but you know what? Doing your homework. You keep talking about this, doing your homework. This is such an important point. Don't just jump into a program. You may have someone calling you saying, you can start next week, and you've been thinking about an EDD or a PhD for a few years, and you're like, this is a sign, I'm just going to jump in without having thought about what do you think you might want to research. I will have a link in the show notes below for a specific YouTube I have about that. But the more prepared you are before you sit in that first class, whether it's physical or online, the more productive you're going to be, and the potential of you successfully graduating with a smoother journey like you had is absolutely increased.
Yes. And, with so much being online and that university through which you're going to be working being a long way away, and the professors are sending an email, picking up the phone, and talking to a professor who doesn't know you from Adam's house cat. They are not going to look at that as a bother, because here you are, someone who has obviously been successful to this point, and now you want to go to the next step, and you want to go to their university. And of all the people you could have reached out to get some advice, to get some information, you picked them. You're not a bother. You have paid them a tremendous compliment. And now they think that you're the greatest person in the world, because when you needed advice, look who you had the smarts to reach out to. And, it's not like approaching someone when you were a high school freshman among a cast of thousands. You're one of the few at this point. You are more of a colleague. And now, at the very least, you're on that person's radar. And they can answer the questions that you have. And they can also answer the questions that you didn't know to ask. And then when it comes time to you either make it into the program or you don't make it into the program, your name being on the radar of a couple of professors, it can make all the difference in the world. You've done something to stand out just a little bit. And that's the initiative that a lot of people don't take. It's not going through, the steps aren't all that obvious at times. You got to just do your homework, form your network, show your interest, and reap the benefits.
And taking initiative is, I would argue, one of the required skill sets. Dr. Leonard Cassuto says, when you're a doctoral student, you're the CEO of your education. This is not a small thing. This is not a small thing. People will create spreadsheets about buying a new car or, where they want to live or where they're going to go on vacation, but sometimes just hop into a graduate program or apply to a graduate program without doing that same level of research. And so I think this suggestion to reach out, and there's so many ways now through email and LinkedIn and avenues like that to make sure that you're getting into the program that's the best fit for you.
Absolutely. And I know, we've talked about deciding on that dissertation topic early. And I think once you form that little relationship, it's not too early to broach the subject of here's what I'm thinking about. And as I say that, I'm thinking about one particular example of someone who was in my doctoral cohort, and she came into the program with this in mind. I know what I want to do my dissertation on. I'm over this particular program, and we have data going back 5 years on this program. I've already collected the data. There's my dissertation. Well, she found out a little later, honey, that's all well and good that you've got all that data, but did this university give you permission to collect that data? Now, if you'd like to do your dissertation on that program, that's fine. Write your proposal on that. And if your proposal passes, you can begin collecting your data. And there's this little thing called the Institutional Review Board that you must apply to that's going to look real hard at what data you're going to collect and how you're going to collect it and how you're going to protect the subject. So, the security, that sort of thing. So instead of I've got 5 years worth of data I can use, it was I can do this, but I'm really going to be starting from square one, and I might be looking at collecting data for the next 5 years. It's better to know that on the front end than to get way, way into things, because that's where the people get frustrated and go, all this work. And now you tell me, well, now we told you because we didn't know you didn't know. Ask on the front end.
Yes. Again, coming back to this point, if at least you know your general area and you're talking about it, you're presenting it, people who have walked this road can say, oh, well, but have you thought about this? Or let me tell you all the reasons that's not going to work. So we're not suggesting you come in with this perfectly well-formed research question that you're going to examine, but this general topic area, and then being open to learning from the experts, whether it's the peers who are ahead of you or your faculty. Hey, this is how we're going to tweak that. And I love that you brought up the IRB, because I see that a lot, especially in the field of education, where people will come in and say, oh, I want to survey my students, or maybe a business owner in a DBA program wants to survey his employees. And there are actually human subjects concerns around that. That doesn't mean you can't research that topic in general, but you may have to take it to another organization or another school or a different set of students that aren't yours. And so these are all little things that can be pitfalls that can kind of make the journey less enjoyable. And if you're out there talking about what you want to do and you're open to receiving feedback, then that all plays into it coming together in a way that maybe is a little more enjoyable.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And, taking suggestions, that sort of thing, we've talked some about that. One thing that helped me was realizing that dissertation, that is the university's dissertation. It has to have their stamp of approval. It's that university's reputation that's on the line. When they make you Dr. Frank Buck, the research that you did, it reflects on them. So sometimes we get so wrapped up in my dissertation and what I want in it, we're not so open to the feedback. Realize that's the university's dissertation. It's not your dissertation. So when the chair says, you need to do this, you need to do that. Now, I mean, that dissertation, it's one study. It is to show that you know how to do a study. Once the program's over, if there was something else you want to do a little bit differently, you can write journal articles. You can do workshops. You can do keynotes. You can do anything with it that you want. But your goal at that point is to graduate from the program. So understand, it is the university's dissertation.
What you just said is so important. I want to spend a couple more minutes on this. A dissertation is just a demonstration project to that university that you're meeting their program outcomes. Yes. So I come across students all the time that say, I'm in a doctoral program because I'm going to do this and I want to do this and this is, and I say, hang on, time out. Do that after your doctor fill in the blank.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's great. You know where you want to go. So we're going to envision that 2 to 3 years post your degree, and we're going to pick something that sends you on that trajectory, but first and foremost meets the university's requirements for an acceptable doctoral level project.
Yes, that's it. That's it. And the people that understand that are the people who are successful. And the people that just beat their head up against that brick wall and thinking, I'm going to wear that chair down. They just don't understand this is going to be this is the best study in the history of the world. No. And you wind up being all but dissertation like so many others.
So Frank, let's sneak in some of your productivity tips here because you have so many amazing ones and all this was such important foundational work. But let's say the listeners are like, yeah, I'm on it. I'm going to get my topic. I'm going to be open to feedback. I'm going to do everything that I can to set the odds in my favor. But once you're in the program, it can get pretty hectic. There's a lot going on. There's deadlines, there's timelines, there's work, there's family. What are some of the things that were kind of your saving grace as you were going through your program?
Batch-related items. Now, of course, I was getting in the car, drive to class, So when I get to that campus and I walk in the library, what are all of the in the library things that I need to do? It might be something related to this paper I'm working on for this class and something for this other paper. And I need to ask the librarian a question. I want to have all those things right in front of me. And then I'm going to go to class. I needed to ask these 3 class members something, and I needed to ask the professor something. I want to have all that right there together in front of me, and it can be a paper planner. I like to, especially these days, a digital task list where when something occurs to you that you have to do, you throw it in there, and that's step number 1. You got it. And then when does that need to happen? Well, our online class meets, and we're having this forum, and the other 8 people that are in my cohort are all going to be in that Zoom session. So what date is that Zoom session? Well, that's the date that these tasks need to have as a due date so that when we get together, I'm seeing all of those, there very clearly. You're going to be working on a number of projects. It's this paper, it's the dissertation. For each one of those things, I love the book, Getting Things Done by David Allen. He poses the question, okay, you've got these various projects. What's the next step on each one? Can you tell me exactly what it is that's going to move each one of those forward? It might be a phone call. It might be an email. It might be, I'm waiting on something from someone else. I can't move further until I get that. So if I haven't gotten it in a reasonable time, I need to email, phone call, whatever. Because so many things fall through the cracks. I need to, whatever it is, what's going to move you from here to there? Well, I just don't know. Well, if you don't know, you need to figure it out. So, knowing what those outcomes are, knowing what the next action toward completing them is, so that, having it all in a system where it's all in front of you. The biggest thing is so many people, they don't know what's falling through the cracks. It's like, I got a lot to do. Well, show me what you have to do. Well, I don't know. A lot of it's in my head. I got some sticky notes here. I got things here. I'm waking up in the middle of the night thinking about things. No, put it all in one place. As soon as it occurs to you, put it in that system, then arrange things in a logical order, and then get to work.
And Frank, I have to ask, do you have a favorite system? I am old school paper planner girl.
Mm-hmm. I use Remember the Milk for my tasks. And even the free version is so powerful. You just throw something in there, give it a due date, and then Evernote for the reference information. Now, of course, all of us know Word, or we know Google Docs, which are great for documents, things that are going to be printed out on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. But as you're doing the research, having a good system of notes, and I think Evernote is the king. Now, little disclaimer, I am an Evernote certified expert, which basically means I've used Evernote for a long time, liked it so much, I wanted to know as much as possible, so went through the certification program so that I could learn more and be associated with other people who are at that level. So I do have some vested interest in Evernote, but the search capabilities are phenomenal. That you have the ability to have various notebooks, so like a notebook for each class, and then for your dissertation, a notebook for each chapter where there are notes in there related to the various, kind of like in the old days when people would have index cards. It's like digital index cards. Here's a thought that I want to put in my dissertation. I found this in this particular book on this particular page, and you put that information together on an index card, and then you put the index cards in the order, and you started writing the paper. Do the exact same thing with Evernote, and and it's so much easier these days since it's all digital. You can do a lot of copying and pasting. To me, those are the tools. You've got the task list to kind of keep you moving forward on what do I need to be doing today. And then you've got a place for that reference information so that you're not going to forget anything. It's kind of like a steel trap. Once it hits your radar, it's in the right place. And forgetting actually becomes a good thing, because the things I have to do are in Remember the Milk. The reference information, it's in Evernote. Remembering versus forgetting, it's now a non-issue because it's all in the system.
Now, Frank, just because I know this was new for me and probably for a lot of the listeners, Remember the Milk is an app?
Yes, rememberthemilk.com. So first of all, it's a website, so you get to it from any computer in the world. Just log in with your username and password, and then free app for any platform. Just log in with your same login credentials, and your tasks sync back and forth. I can even add to it with my voice. Oh, and here's a big one. Think all those emails that you get, and you read 3 paragraphs, and you go, "Oh, this is a to-do. I need to call Bob." Yeah. Remember the Milk usual email address. Forward that email to that email address. It's now sitting over on Remember the Milk, and the task is now call Bob, and the entire body of that email message is in a little attached note. So now I've got, what do I need to do? I need to call Bob. What am I going to talk to him about? Well, there's the entire body of the email message. And so now, instead of having this long email inbox of, well, I've got this one still sitting here because that's sort of my reminder to I need to call Bob. And what else was it I need to do? I remember there was something else I need to do about this email. But anyway, here's this email still sitting there. And you got 50 more just like it, where you're rethinking what it was you actually needed to do. No, get that email inbox back to empty every day. If it's something you need to do, send it over there to Remember the Milk. Decide when it's going to happen, exactly what needs to happen. You've got the information that was in that email in that note section of that task. Then get rid of the email. Get that sucker back to empty every day. Just like the metal mailbox in front of your house. We don't store stuff in there. We check the mail. We make decisions about every piece of it, and then it's done. It needs to be the same with your email.
Frank, like I said earlier, I tend to be more old school sticky notes. I am going to try this Remember the Milk because it sounds amazing. So I love that tip. I'm going to check it out. But I just want to kind of reiterate some of these themes that I'm hearing. And if you've been a listener, this is not new to you. You have got to plan purposefully and you have got to organize, or this is not going to be very fun. And many people work through an amazing career, get all the way through a master's degree without planning purposefully and without having to do something like Evernote. But these are things that can become a deal breaker when you're working on a doctoral degree. So we want you guys to think about this. If you're going to be the CEO of your education, figure out what works for you as quickly as you can. You do not want to be figuring out, how am I going to organize all my references for my dissertation when you're 3 years into your program? That's a lot of backtracking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are fantastic hacks. And Frank, I know that you've got downloads on your website. Now, your website is frankbuck.org, correct?
Yes, frankbuck.org. There's a lot of stuff there. You could get overwhelmed very quickly. I've been blogging since like 2005. So there's 1,500 plus blog posts and there are lots of YouTube videos and that sort of thing. But what I would suggest is do this first. When you get to the website, you'll see a place where you can join my email list. You automatically get 2 free gifts right off the bat. One, you get the first chapter of a book that I wrote in like 2016 called Get Organized, Time Management for School Leaders. You get the first chapter, which shows you how to handle the paper, how to get your desk clean with a little tool called the tickler file. We hadn't talked about it in this episode, but get on the email list and you'll know all about the tickler file. Second, several days later, you get an ebook that talks about Remember the Milk, how to get it, how to set it up, strategy for using it, so that if you've liked this, what we talked about as far as having a digital task list, there's the nuts and bolts of doing it. And then once a week, you get an email from me letting you know about new content, letting you know about things like this when I've been a guest on a podcast that you otherwise might not know about. You'll be able to sort of keep up with me. And then as there are things that I read that I think, gosh, other people would be interested in this, I throw those kind of things in there. So once a week, you get a nice little email from me with those sorts of things that are all very nuts and bolts, because I know we're busy. We don't want a lot of theory. We want to know, how do I get from point A to point B? Because life doesn't have to be as hard as we sometimes make it, believe me.
And Frank, I love that you're only emailing about once a week. I know people are probably saying, oh, the last thing I need to do is join another email list. But what you promise is that you're not going to be going crazy with all these emails and that everything's actionable. And you're right. We didn't get to the tickler files, but I'm going to say this kind of as a tickler to the audience. Once I got your free gift, I ran out into the kitchen and I said to my partner, I just learned something that's going to change my life. So you guys need to check this out. I'm like, how could I have lived on this planet for this long and never heard of this before? Mm-hmm. So you guys got to check this out. I'm going to have the links below. And so Frank, thank you for that. That was incredible.
But I'm going to tell you, I will tell you this. I learned about the tickler file when I was 8 years old. 8 years old. From my dad. So we're talking, this was like late 60s, something like that. So it was a tool that was valuable then. It's still a tool that's valuable now because we're still dealing with paper. And you're right, this one little thing will change your life.
Frank, as we're wrapping up today's episode, I'm curious, do you have a favorite quote or some final words of wisdom you'd like to share with the audience today?
This is an old Alvin Toffler quote. And I hope I get the wording exactly right here. But you've got to think about the big things while you're doing the small things, so that all the small things go in the right direction.
Well, Frank, what a great way to end today's episode. And thank you so much for spending your time with us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for everyone for listening.
Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Until then, if you're looking for more ways to invite joy into your journey, check out the free resources at expandyourhappy.com. You'll find downloads like an article I wrote titled, "The Doctoral Journey, 12 Things You Need to Know That They Probably Won't Tell You." Based on audience request, there is a PDF that organizes all podcasts by the 7 steps detailed in the Happy Doc Student Handbook, which you can also find on the website. And if you're looking for Happy Doc Student swag, I've got that too. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel, and if you want to make my day, rate and review so that together we can change the way graduate education is delivered and experienced. Hey, one more thing. Just a quick reminder that the information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only.